Well, here we are just literally 8 days away from the start of the 2023 NFL draft, and a really exciting episode coming up here as all eyes are on that number one pick. The Carolina Panthers are on the clock, so to speak. And so we're excited to get to talk to Joe Person, the Carolina Panthers beat writer for The Athletic, coming up a little bit later in this episode. Really looking forward to hearing his insights on the trade, obviously, with the Chicago Bears to get the number one pick. You know, is it CJ Stroud? Is it Bryce Young? And a couple other items that we're really excited to talk with him about here, Mark, in just a little bit. But before we get into the interview, I just got to say, Allen Robinson, the former Bear, is a Pittsburgh Steeler, and the Steelers now continuing their run of poaching former Bears and getting them onto their squad somehow. The reuniting of Anthony Miller, Mitch Trubisky, James Daniels, and Allen Robinson now complete.
The glory days of the Chicago Bears are now the future of the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's an exciting time in Steel Town, that's for sure. It's funny. As soon as this move happened, obviously this is like it's in a sense, I don't think it's a meaningless move, but it's not OBJ to the Ravens. It's not gigantic news. Lead off your podcast type news with, unless your podcast centers around a Bears fan and a Steelers fan, in which it affects us both in such a unique way, especially because now all of the talk about the rumors of the Steelers wanting to move up and maybe the Bears looking to move down, and the Bears and Steelers maybe doing some more trading and more maneuvering through the draft.
There's a lot of connections.
There is. I'll say this. I think it's a low floor, high ceiling type of move for Pittsburgh. They're only paying like a $5 million of the salary.
Los Angeles Rams taking on $10 million of the salary. Steelers taking on $5 million, and all they did was swap 7th round picks. Steelers dropping like 13 picks in the 7th round.
Yeah,
I think that's all right.
It really is it clearly something happened in LA with Allen, and so it just did not work. It just didn't work. For whatever reason, I don't know if we'll find out the whole truth ever. But I could see this being a really nice get for Kenny Pickett. Allen Robinson is not exactly a top 10 wide receiver, but he is a huge, especially like third down possession guy, great hands, short, immediate route type stuff along the sideline, contested grabs. He's got incredible hands. If he can get healthy and be the route runner he was in Jacksonville and Chicago, Kenny Pickett just really helped himself stay afloat in the tough AFC North coming on up this year. I think it's a great move.
Yeah, KP also showing up to some of the workouts now. He's looking yoked. That guy's put on some poundage, so we'll see how that
himself.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, although I think he still drinks his coffee like a normal human being and doesn't put mayo in it.
Yeah,
like the Levis train there. But yeah, no, from a Steelers perspective for Allen Robinson, man, you mentioned it, low risk, high reward type of deal, $5 million. And the best part about this too, I mean, yeah, no, it's not like as sexy as picking up an OBJ with the Ravens. It's also not, $18 million potentially in a cap hit. But aside from that, I think this is like a huge steal for Pittsburgh because, wide receiver actually in terms of depth was a question on this team, really outside of Pickens and Deontay Johnson. There were some questions. I mean, they drafted Calvin Austin last year. He was hurt all last year. So technically this is his rookie year. And behind him, very thin. So to bring in a very talented former, Pro Bowl caliber receiver to come in and be the wide receiver 3, I think they're not going to ask him to be the man. Yeah. Obviously, when Cooper Kupp goes down in LA last year, it's like, oh, well, now we really need Allen Robinson to be the dude. Maybe he's just not that point of his career anymore. A couple injuries and things like that have put him in a different spot. They need a slot guy. I mean, he can absolutely play in the slot. And I think, if he's the number 3, even number 4 target, I mean, you got Freiermuth there too, then that's a huge, benefit to Pittsburgh to have a guy that talented being their number 3, number 4 option. It's a win-win, really.
Well, yeah, and he definitely he's a veteran who's seen it all, who's been with anyone and everyone. You know what I mean? You see the list of quarterbacks who've thrown a ball to Allen Robinson. It's insane. And so and him and Mitch, they got along. Allen always was a huge defender of Mitch. And I think, Mitch still being there in the locker room, like it's just one of those things where you look at the drama and the divas that Steelers Nation had dealt with at the end of the Tomlin era versus now. They've cleaned a lot of that up. And a Steelers locker room that is not drama filled, who can only imagine what that can do for Mike Tomlin's psyche, and he can actually work on game plans and scheming as opposed to like, hey, turn off the Instagram lives.
I think you meant the end of the Ben era, perhaps, not the Tomlin era, because that's still going.
Yeah, the end of the end of the Triple B era. Tomlin's still there. Yeah,
definitely.
The end of
Bell
the last
and
era.
Brown.
Yes. Yeah.
For sure. Absolutely. Yeah. So it's a win-win for Pittsburgh. I don't know what happened in LA. Obviously, they are now the Rams. We're talking about finally, maybe now we're seeing the ramifications, the ramifications, if you will, of constantly punting on the NFL draft, bringing in high-priced free agents to round out your team to win now. You won now, you got the ring, but now we're seeing the after effects of high cap situation, older quarterback, and aging contracts that don't look so great anymore, and no more Jalen Ramsey. They are slowly but surely gutting this, franchise right now. And kind of, I don't know about you, but it does seem like they're almost getting close to having to start from scratch outside of a few cornerstone pieces in Cooper Kupp and, Matt Stafford for another few years.
Yeah. I mean, to me, the interesting is a year ago, we were so high in the Rams because remember a year ago, the headlines were they signed Bobby Wagner and they got Allen Robinson. And now they don't have Bobby Wagner and they don't have Allen Robinson. And so maybe flying under the radar for the Rams right now is the best thing for the Rams, and no one's really talking about them. They have some draft capital now ahead of them in this upcoming draft. And to me, it all relies on if Stafford and Kupp are healthy in the NFC, they're going to be a factor because the NFC is weaker and it is not as deep. So that to me, that's the most important thing is that what is Matt Stafford's health going into this year fully, and Cooper Kupp's health fully. And you go from there. But you're absolutely right. Some of these contracts are looking bad for them. But the Rams also are a team that I feel like this is just going to be who they are. They will be iterations of this version of the Rams where they're signing big deals. They're attracting stars because it's L.A. They're always going to have people want to play in L.A. Right now, the NFC, it is the more open division. And I think you're seeing a little bit of that guys wanting to get out of the AFC and moving into the NFC for sure.
Yeah, look, I don't think they were ever planning to be the team that creates dynasties because they knew what their approach was, and it was to get championships, 5 years apart at a time and kind of pick away at those things. Now, the Matt Stafford trade, maybe that they felt like that window would, open up a little bit because they get that caliber player at the most key position. But I mean, if it works, it works. And it did work for them. So even if you're a Rams fan, you feel good about where you're at right now because of what happened 2 years ago and that you got the championship that you did this all for.
If you could tell me as a fan of a franchise that let's say about every 6 years, you're going to either play in a Super Bowl or win a Super Bowl, but it's going to mean like every 6 years you're changing a bunch of jerseys and the names of the back are changing. You absolutely take it. And right now in the Sean McVay era, they played for a Super Bowl and they won a Super Bowl. And now this is the transition 2 years. Can they get back up on it? I think we'd all take it. It's flying under the radar for LA. It's a unique thing, and we'll see what they do in the draft. We'll see. They also, to me, are a crucial franchise for post draft. There's always that signing period where there's a bunch of then veterans getting picked up and signed. What LA is gonna fill out the roster in a lot of ways on those signings. There's still some big names out there who, like, they're not with a team right now. LA is a perfect example of a team like veteran minimum contracts to plug and play guys who will just come in for another load up for a year run.
We're all, sitting by the seat of our pants, getting ready for the next run in LA. That's for sure. All right. Well, that does it for our beginning portion here. A little housekeeping notes, but of course, coming up, we also are going to talk about Jalen Hurts signing that, groundbreaking contract with the Philadelphia
Incredible.
Eagles. Some news out of Miami with Tua making some remarks as well today, as well as some sprinkles of rumors and news surrounding a possible trade for Trey Lance. A lot of quarterback news coming up as well here on the Football Lounge. But first, we're going to get to our long-awaited interview with Joe Person of The Athletic. All right, well, we are excited to welcome in Joe Person of The Athletic, covering the Carolina Panthers. And he's been covering the team since 2010, so a lot of insight from Joe. But, Joe, first off, thank you so much for joining us. And, just a lot going on here with the Carolina Panthers over the last, month or so, I'd say.
Yeah, it's been crazy. I mean, it's been fun. This is a team that has sort of teetered on irrelevancy since Cam Newton hurt his shoulder. What was that? Halfway through the 2018 season. They made the playoffs in 2017, lost in the wild card to New Orleans. David Tepper buys the team in 18, and it's sort of, Cam got hurt. It was a midseason game at Pittsburgh, not to get too deep into the weeds, but you guys will probably remember it. TJ Watt blasted Cam. That Panthers were 6-2, and it's ever since that moment they've been looking for their next franchise quarterback. You guys know they did a merry-go-round thing the last 3 years with Matt Rule and all those quarterbacks they kind of rented each year. And it was time for this franchise to make a bold move like this at that position. And as I say, it's been fun to cover it. And the next week's going to be busy, but fun as well.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned since David Tepper's been on board, they really haven't been shy about making unorthodox moves or big moves, especially with Scott Fitterer as well. He's not afraid to do that either. And that brings us to the trade that is just about a month old now with the Chicago Bears. So that number 1 overall pick, sending number 9, a 23 second, 24 first, 25 second, and DJ Moore. So a haul certainly there to Chicago. But for that number 1 overall pick, I just want to ask you, Joe, what was your reaction to the news? Was the writing on the wall from your perspective? And I guess, in terms of just the trade itself, can you provide any insights on really what happened behind the scenes to lead us to that point?
Yeah, so I did late that week. It went down at 5:00 on a Friday, which is when teams, there's a lot of these sports teams, as you guys know, that's when they dump bad news. This was good news. But yeah, it had been building. But my colleagues, a couple of my colleagues at The Athletic based in Chicago, and I did a behind the scenes look for The Athletic. And it was kind of cool to go into the conversations that began at the combine between these general managers, Scott Fitter and Ryan Poles, the kind of back and forth. One of the things I thought was really interesting, and we heard behind the scenes after the trade went down that the Panthers would be okay with 2 quarterbacks, and that was true at the time, because what Chicago really wanted to do, and there were talks along these lines, they were going to go from 1 to 2 and switch with Houston, and then they were going to go from 2 to 9 with the Panthers and really get a lot of picks, even more than the ones that Dan just rattled off. And so that tells you if the Panthers were willing to go to 2, I think at that time they would have been okay with C.J. Stroud or Bryce Young. Then as the process went along, or that week after the combine, Houston was sort of dragging its feet. Nick Caserio wouldn't pull the trigger. And I think that the Panthers and the Bears just got together and were like, let's do this thing without Houston. And here we are.
Joe, one of the things from my perspective is what I love on NFL Twitter. On a Sunday, Patrick Mahomes makes a giant throw to Travis Kelce, and all the memes come out. showing the Bears fans be like, can you believe the Bears passed on this to draft that? And they rub Mitchell Trubisky back in my face. So from your perspective, if you're talking directly to Panthers fans, you say, who's the guy in this draft? If the Panthers key in on Bryce Young or Stroud, whoever they take at one, who's the guy that has the biggest chance in 3 years from now makes the throw and NFL Twitter blows up because can you believe the Panthers traded up to number 1 and didn't pick this guy? Is there a guy? Is there that guy out there in this draft, or does he not exist?
The guys, the two that come to mind are Hendon Hooker and Anthony Richardson. And that's because, in Hooker's case, because of injury, in Richardson's case, because of inconsistency and accuracy problems, they come into this draft with low floors. But I think they both have pretty high ceilings. Like Richardson, I mean, he could be something. And I wrote a piece last week for The Athletic, and people who didn't bother to click the link thought I was crazy. I wasn't saying the Panthers were still considering Richardson at number 1, but as of last week, they were still pretty high on him. If some team blew them away with it, pretty much it'd have to be Houston, with an offer for the Panthers to go down to like 2, which what we discussed a minute ago. But I just think at 1, he's just he's just the epitome of boom or bust.
Yeah.
And so to your question, Mark, I do think he could really be a boom, but after giving up all that they did to get up to 1, I just don't think they can take that risk. And that's why, I mean, a trade back, if they had gotten some of those picks back, then you could have lived with it. But Scott Bitter told us yesterday that they're going to certainly all but likely going to stay at 1. He said, look, you always pick up the phone and listen, but gave every indication they're going to stay at 1. And he gave a lot of indications that pick's going to be Bryce Young.
Yeah.
Talking with Joe Person of The Athletic, and that's really been something that's moved into that arena, Joe, over the last 10 days-ish of Bryce Young really like almost solidifying himself in those Vegas odds. He is now the clear-cut favorite to be taken number 1 overall. I mean, obviously there's always a chance, but in your mind, has that gap completely disintegrated between, or continued to widen, I should say, between him and CJ Stroud over the last week or so? And is there still a possibility the Panthers could shock the world and do a deal at the 11th hour and, maybe get themselves an Anthony Richardson moving down 4 spots or something like that?
Yeah, so I do think Bryce has distanced himself. And I don't know. I think we're just finding out about it in the last 10 days. I spoke to a general manager a few days ago, I guess it was this week, and he said that the buzz has been, that he was hearing a lot of Bryce Young stuff at pro days, which were 2-3 weeks ago. So I do think the Panthers went into it with an open mind. But I just the more you talk to people around the league, it's like, if there's a guy you're going to trade up for in this group, and it's a good group, but that Bryce Young is that guy. I mean, you turn on the tape from Alabama, and look, I get that he's small, and that is certainly an issue. And that's why we've all discussed it for the last 2 months, or feels like 2 years. But even with that big caveat about his size, and I'm not even as worried about his height as much as his frame. That I think he kind of bloated up on, I don't know if he was like chugging 3 gallons of water before getting on the scale in Indy.
Yeah.
I have the players say that's kind of one of the tricks. And but he got to 204. That's what it'll always say on the back of his football card. But then you talk to scouts and draft experts who think his more natural weight's more like 195. At any rate, if you kind of get past that and I think that's what we are getting all hung up on is Frank Reich's history with big quarterbacks. I mean, you guys know it. I mean, he's never had a guy shorter than 6'3", and most of the guys he's had at quarterback since he's been either head coach, coordinator, or quarterback coach have been like 6'5", like six. You know, the Philip Rivers.
Been massive dudes, yeah.
So anyway, but I think Bryce Young can be a special player if he can stay healthy, if he can add some bulk. You know, I don't know. It is hard to argue with his resume. It's just that height and weight that you know, especially when you see a guy like Tua, who's not that much bigger, kind of get, and head injuries are a different thing. But look how Tua keeps getting hurt, getting flung to the ground and having his head hit the ground. It hasn't even been necessarily direct head-to-head contact. It's him getting slung around like a ragdoll.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yep.
And, you know, Joe, I want to, going off that point, is there an organization that is more uniquely built though than Carolina? I can't think of one that is maybe comfortable with the idea that we're going to draft a guy and he's only going to be here for 5 years. And we're going to maximize him for 5 years because, as you said, with the Cam Newton window, you know, yeah, obviously they had signed him to a longer deal, but it was about a 7-year run with Cam Newton, and the Panthers were able to say, okay, we got a Super Bowl appearance out of it, got an MVP. You know, a lot of teams are maybe testing this. You know, Baltimore lets, you know, Lamar Jackson go. It's a similar idea. Like, just maximize a guy for 5 years and then let the market dictate if they need to get a big deal and go. Is that something that you think Carolina Panthers fans can handle? Or is this going to be one of those, oh my gosh, if we're drafting a quarterback again in 5 years, this is the biggest disaster and Frank Reich is gone and the Panthers are a bottom feeder franchise?
You know, I mean, Frank Reich and Scott Fitterer, no doubt, their futures are tied to this pick, so they might not survive it. But you bring up an interesting point because you have David Tepper, who is all about, you know, finding what makes the most financial sense, and he has said since the time he came in here that drafting and developing a quarterback makes the most sense because you got him on that team-friendly deal. You've got the 5th-year option at a relatively low number. And then, Mark, as you said, it's like, you know what? We tried it. It didn't work. Or it worked. And, you know, but we're not going to pay a second contract. It is interesting to see how the market is changing. Like, Deshaun Watson's deal, who let's not forget, the Panthers were in on Deshaun Watson a little more than a year ago. But, you know, that's changed a lot. And I think, frankly, some of the owners aren't going to do it. I mean, we see it in Baltimore, and I think it's reasonable to suggest, here we are, we're breaking down Bryce Young's future before he even gets here. But it's a good point, and I think it's reasonable to suggest that could be an avenue that Tepper follows.
It's a fascinating, you know, time for the Carolina Panthers, and in a division where they could, you know, quickly take over if they play their cards right and get this quarterback pick right, because it really is, you know, prime pickings right there in the NFC South. So, you know, this is, as you mentioned, a very important pick for Scott Fitterer, Frank Reich, and for the franchise. It'll be very interesting to see. When do you go out for the NFL draft? Are you going to be there all week?
No, I'm going to kind of try to figure out kind of where to pick my spots. And in some regards, talking to people, it makes more sense to be here. I've had people tell me that being there, I've never covered a draft. When I was at the Charlotte Observer, Scott Fowler, when 2011, when they drafted Cam first overall, Scott Fowler, a colleague of mine at the Observer, went to, it was in New York at the time. And I've had other people say, like, it's hard to hear. You're in, you know, kind of in like the bowels of at that point, Radio City Music Hall. But yeah, it's well, and then you got to like get a flight back Friday morning and beat Bryce Young back to Charlotte.
Right. Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm kind of trying to figure out what makes the most sense. But it's gonna be fun. Like I remember covering Cam's the night they drafted Cam, and I was, as I said, I stayed here at the stadium, and they, just like they're doing this year, they sold tickets. They had a bunch of live music, a bunch of people at the stadium. It was a very festive atmosphere, and it should be. Like, this is a big deal. This, for the Panthers to go up and get that number one pick, like, you know, Scott Fitter said this week, this is a big deal. We're hearing about it. You know, everybody's talking about us on TV, but he said it's also a really important decision for this franchise.
Yeah, a franchise-defining moment for sure. Yeah, I only covered one NFL draft back in 2016. That was the Zeke Elliott, Carson Wentz, Jared Goff draft in Chicago. And yeah, I can attest it is mayhem, it's craziness. So that makes perfect sense to be able to report on location, where the team is at rather than necessarily get in that craziness of that environment. But yeah, really excited to see what the Panthers do with that number one overall pick. Although it appears lately the secret is out essentially on who they love the most at quarterback. Joe Person from The Athletic, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate your time.
I appreciate it, guys. Have a good rest of the week.
All right, that was awesome. Really, really good to hear from those with boots on the ground. And when it's the number one overall pick with the Carolina Panthers, great to get some insight. It does appear, I mean, we talked about it. Bryce Young has been the pick for a little bit now. Just getting further confirmation there from Joe, who's been on this thing from the start. It's looking like Bryce Young's going to be a Carolina Panther unless something crazy happens.
Yeah, you said, but in the tease into the interview that the Carolina Panthers are on the clock. The Houston Texans appear to be on the clock. It
Right.
looks like the pick is is in. I will say one of my what I love about, first off, Joe gave us a little stuff off the air that's like he's working on another article that there's a great, you need to, if you don't have an Athletic subscription, you need to get one. It's worth it.
Very affordable too, and they got great deals and stuff. Yeah.
He's working on an article that's very fascinating. So I'm very excited to see more wait for that come out. I'm not gonna spoil it for him or anything, but they really do, those guys are the best. And The Athletic is such a unique organization. They basically just hand plucked like every expert from every city and was like, you're going to write for us now. And so to get his insight, to me, the thing that was really fascinating is that idea that there was the work between the three organizations, Chicago, Houston, and Carolina, were almost all working together on Chicago goes to 2, Carolina goes from 9 to 2. And probably a lot of that was, if we would have more time with him, I would really push him on, was that DJ Moore? Was that the hang up? And that polls probably really wanted DJ Moore, not just picks. And so he's willing to give up a couple more picks, probably a second or a third somewhere, to just say, screw it, I'm cutting Houston out. I'm just going to Carolina and getting DJ Moore. And I think to me, the only other thing I would have loved to press him on, and maybe this is something in the future if we ever can get him back on and get more time with him, is that idea that, was this the right move for Carolina in this draft? Because next year it looks like we have two guys that could be superstar quarterbacks, and you give up. But how do you know that anyone's going to want to trade who has the 1 and 2 pick next year to even trade with you? You could offer them 7 first-round picks, but they may not take it because they want one of those two guys. So
yeah, I mean, it's whenever you're in a new year, the team that is picking 1, 2, or 3 are usually picking that because they don't have a great quarterback at the helm, right? And so unless you're in a unique position like Chicago where you think you got a good quarterback, but he's young and they were still pieced together the rest of the team. I mean, that is true. Like sometimes you got to strike while the kettle's hot, right? And the opportunity is there, and you go and take your guy. Plus, who knows if you have the assets next year? Like, because the Panthers are that one team, as we've talked about in the past, where even when it's really bad, it's 5-11. It's never. It's not going to be 1-16 or 2-15,
like it was to get Cam.
5-11 was really bad, and that was a team that was in 5-6 other games because they got a good defense and they've got good players,
and the division,
and they're in a bad division. So. It's an opportunity now for them to do that, and take a guy that they think really highly of. And look, Bryce Young is a guy that, for all of his faults, we've talked about the size issue time and time again, and it's a real thing. Absolutely. As Joe mentioned, that's it's more about the frame than it is the height. But even with all that being said, the guy processes and diagnoses plays at about as elite a level as we've seen a prospect. I mean, Trevor Lawrence wasn't an elite processor that people were talking about coming out.
No.
It was all about the physical tools he had and how he was able to make every throw in the NFL already at the age of 18.
And who knows?
Bryce is that guy right now.
When you are that size, it makes you have to win with your head, like be smarter than the defense. So it's a lot of what people are talking about in pro Bryce Young's favor. And the thing that's like, oh, well, Kyler Murray's the easy comp. But remember, Kyler came from a system that was just Lincoln Riley making quarterbacks really good, making it easy for them. And he wasn't 100% all in on football. He was still actively playing baseball at Oklahoma. Bryce Young has been all in on football, working with guys who know the pro game at Alabama. And so there is a lot to like about Bryce Young. And I do think if your organization is comfortable with the idea that, hey, by year 2, he's a really ascending star. And by year 5, his body's beat up, but somewhere in between years 2 and years 5, we win a Super Bowl or are competing for a Super Bowl, then we'll roll the dice, we'll risk it. And then if we don't resign him to a long deal, we don't resign him to a long deal, we move on to the next guy. And so it seems like Carolina and Dave Tepper are an organization that is uniquely built to say, we don't have tradition. We're not the Green Bay Packers. We're not the Chicago Bears, the New York Giants. We don't have this long story. We're not the Steelers with this ancient tradition where we can't like fall apart for a year or two and have to rebuild. Carolina, it seems to be very much willing to go kind of like we were talking about earlier, like, the Rams saying, screw it, we're going to do it our way in LA. If the Panthers may be willing to do it their way in Carolina on the East Coast, it's going to be great. I can't wait for the draft next week. It's so awesome that it's already here. There's so many storylines, and our draft preview next week is going to be a lot of fun.
Super excited. I can't wait for that. We're going to preview the entire first round of the draft, give our kind of our mock draft. We do it differently than a lot of other places where they will, each individual person on the show will give their first round. Mark and I are going to draft the first round together, alternating picks. That's how we did it, when we started the show and how we've done it since. And that kind of just makes it the show's mock draft for that first round coming up next week. So really looking forward to that. Next Monday. And, just to put a bow on all of this Panthers talk, I love that you brought up that, aspect of them being in a position where maybe they are just in it for the short-term gains of certain picks, because, and I'd love to ask this of Joe if we got him back on too, the whole situation with Matt Rule and David Tepper, we could have probably talked about that for 15 minutes in and of itself. But we were obviously, tight on time. That was the unique one because David Tepper is known to not be a very patient guy. Like, he wants to win now, and he is all in on that. But then they gave Matt Rule at the beginning. They said, "We're giving you a leash," and they gave him all of that money and gave him that long contract, and that's why now they're paying him a lot of money to be coaching elsewhere. And so the whole thing of that is, I wonder if that was a moment of clarity for David Tepper. That was I can't, I was validated in how I wanted to go about this when I bought the team. We can't go this route of waiting on 5 and 11 seasons one after the other. And that's why after 3, or 2.5 or whatever, was just like, I can't, this is it's not good enough. We got to move on. We got to move forward. Can't get stuck in a rut for 5-6 years.
To me, the mark of a great organization and a great leader is not doubling down on what didn't work.
Cutting your losses.
Yeah, cut it and move on. Because if you were to say, no, we got to give him more time. I gave him that contract for a reason. We got to give him more time. Well, the Panthers would be, it could set them back even longer for a longer time. And that's one of the reasons why you see organizations like the Daniel Jones thing.
I was exactly not saying
it
it's
literally,
perfect
it's
example.
like it's one of those things. I'm like, it's to me the mark of a bad decision. Well, now we could be proven wrong, but that to me seems like an organization that should have said to themselves, we let the clock run out. We squeezed as much out of this orange as we can. Let's go get a new orange. And instead they paid the pulpy, lumpy orange $40 million a year. So we'll see. Every organization does it slightly differently, but that was a lot of fun. And thanks to Joe again for joining us, and hopefully get him back on the show eventually, especially if the Panthers have in a year from now are really turned it around and things head in the right direction.
Right. Yeah. It could happen fast. Yeah. Very appreciative of Joe for taking the time out. Super busy time of year, as we talked about. So really glad that he was able to block out some time for us here on the Football Lounge with Mark and Dan. How about that? We're getting up there right now with the guest list. Now pressure's on for sure.
Yeah.
On the next one.
I will say this as we jump into the rest of the show here, and we have talking some quarterback stuff. Can we just say the DeMar Hamlin news this morning? You're getting it out that he's going to be he's going to have an opportunity to resume football activities in full, cleared by 4 different doctors. I give him all the credit. It's if you ever ask yourself, if you're that Joe Schmo sitting at home thinking to yourself, you could play professional sports, that's the reason why some guys make it and other guys don't, is that switch in their brain of like, he's an athlete and he's like, this is what I do. And I'm going to face this adversity. I'm going to take this head on. And if I can play, you bet your ass I'm going to play because I love the game and this is what I do. Like it is, it's an incredible, incredible story and very, very excited for him, nervous for his family and his loved ones, but excited for him to take that first hit again and prove like I'm back and I'm and my career is not going to just end on this one real incredibly fluke tragic hit.
Super enlightening. And now he has said too that he wants to be a voice for I'm going to butcher the name, carditis or something like that.
I'll let you
which is the leading cause of death in youth athletes, and it's a very unique thing. It's a fluke, like you said, it's a fluke thing where your body sustains a physical blow at a specific point where the heartbeat is in between beats, and it's crazy. 5 seconds later you just drop, and that's what happened to him.
It happens in the NBA, happens in the AHL, happens in literally every sport. It's soccer, it's a fluke thing.
It really is. So yeah, glad that he's going to be a voice for it as someone who survived it, and maybe help spread the awareness on that awesome stuff that he's going to be hopefully returning to the field much sooner rather than later. That's for sure. All right, now the news that would have probably led off any of our other shows if we didn't have an awesome interview lined up is the Jalen Hurts. The Philadelphia Eagles really breaking the bank, giving Jalen Hurts a massive 5-year, $255 million deal, 179 of it guaranteed fully, and he now averages out to being the highest paid NFL player ever. And as we know, that is all somewhat relative because this is a per year basis, 51 million. But obviously total money is a different story, and it's going to get beat, within a few months. Someone else will get signed. And so we go on that carousel. But for the time being, Jalen Hurts signing a very lucrative deal. And really, Mark, and I know, you probably have the same thoughts as I do, super team friendly as well.
They're
incredible. Able to lock this guy up for a perfect window in his career and try and squeeze all of that juice out, as you like to say, of the Jalen Hurts, peak years.
Jalen Hurts' cap hit in 2023 will still only be $6.15 million. His cap hit in 2024 will only be $13.56 million. His cap hit in 2025, 21.77, and by 2026, 31.77. So this is somehow, I don't know how they did this deal. I don't know, but GMs are getting smarter, or the NFL is allowing more loopholes, because it feels like this didn't exist a couple of years ago. How can you give a guy that much guaranteed, but the cap hit only be this little? I don't know how they've done it, but it is incredible. and I give them a ton of credit for getting it done for both sides. It's the right time to do it. And if you're the Eagles and you're Jalen Hurts, you now say to yourself, we have this window where in the next 2 years, especially where the NFC is weak, where our cap is not a disaster. We've got to try to win and capitalize on it. And the nice thing is Jalen Hurts is young enough to where he could get another contract if by the end of this, he's still playing at a really elite level like he is at the start of this contract. And if his goes the way of the many of that we've talked about with Cam Newton, and other, mobile quarterbacks, where his body's broken down and he laid it all out in the field for a 7-year run, well, he got his bag, generational money. And so I the first thing I tweeted out, I put it on our socials, is the idea of agents work, Lamar. Agents are a good thing. Yes. And they got it done for their guy and for Philadelphia. It's a win-win all around. I love the deal.
I love the deal as well. And look, it's a situation of the grass isn't always greener as well, because maybe, Jalen could have held out and taken a better, more guaranteed money elsewhere, right? But Colin Cowherd, his co-host, J-Mac, was bringing up how Kyler Murray got way more guaranteed money. And is that fair to Jalen Hurts? And Colin was bringing up on the show that, well, if you're Jalen Hurts, would you rather be on the Arizona Cardinals for an extra $15 million, $20 million, or would you like to be on the Philadelphia Eagles and competing for Super Bowls rather than the state of where Arizona's at right now? And it's perfect. It's a perfect argument, because Jalen Hurts, especially, we've known this guy to care about football and winning over anything else. He showed it at Alabama. He showed his willingness to be a backup, to be a championship, to be a champion, right? I mean, that's a tough pill to swallow. You were on a championship caliber team the year before as the starter, and then Tua Tagovailoa overtakes you. You stay on the team, and then you get your second chance at Oklahoma for your senior year, and then able to go to the NFL. This guy, it's about, good things come to those who wait. Jalen Hurts is like the perfect example of that, and it's worked out great. Now he's in Philly. Their structure, they have the chance to be competitors for the next 5 years in the Super Bowl sweepstakes, not just for a playoff.
Yeah, and you know what? I love a guy who's also can say to himself, I don't really care what that guy got. I care what I'm getting and what's going to work for me and my family, because I think
179 million is going to work for most people.
Yeah, this feels a lot more like the mentality that Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen signed their deals under. Like, I understand that in a year now, 2, like, I'm going to be falling down the charts and my money's going to look not as good as maybe the next guys, but who's going to be in the NFC Championship games, AFC Championship games, and Super Bowls? I want to be in those games, earning those paychecks, getting those endorsement deals, because I'm actually winning, playing winning football. Again, I can't speak enough how much I think it's a home run. Right now, today, Jalen Hurts is without a doubt in my mind the top dog in the NFC. Until Matt Stafford proves that he's 100% healthy and he comes out like he did 2 years ago, he might have something to say for that. But to me, he's the top dog. And now there's some other guys up and coming, but he's the top dog, and he's paid like the top dog in the NFC. And listen, the Eagles, they're going to be a fascinating watch this year, because they lose an offense coordinator, defense coordinator, some really key pieces, but they have some really good draft picks, and they've signed some okay, nice signings. They're going to be definitely a fascinating defending NFC champion going into a year for sure.
That's for sure. They are gonna be in the thick of it each of these years, and really in that division where we don't know what the situation is with Washington. Dallas doesn't seem to be getting much better. So really, I mean, it's them and the Giants, who improved a lot last year, and we'll see if Daniel Jones gets them over the hump. But yeah, I mean, gosh, roll the red carpet out almost for the Philadelphia Eagles here in the next few years. Some other quarterback news. Tua Tagovailoa today, speaking with reporters,
saying
that he did for a bit We don't want to like be hyperbolic here. He's not saying that he's retiring, but he did say that he considered it for a time after sustaining his second concussion in what was it, several weeks. He really thought about it long and hard, and then he just, ended up saying that he just came to the determination, no, he wants to keep playing. He is, in it, and he wants to do it for his son as well, he mentioned. So Tua Tagovailoa is not retiring, but it is important to note that, these are super serious, and it kind of goes back to what we talked about with Joe in the interview about Bryce Young and his size and getting tossed around like a rag doll.
Yeah.
I mean, the whiplash element of this at the quarterback position, you are in a vulnerable spot because you are stationary. You don't have a full steam ahead a lot of times, right? And so if you're getting grabbed, from behind and tossed to the ground, you're going to have to get some like Josh Allen meat on the bones to be able to kind of withstand that. We saw Kenny Pickett get tossed to the ground hard by Roquan Smith last year, instant concussion, so I mean, it's good to see that Tua's made a full recovery and seems to be extremely healthy and ready to go. But you start to stack these things, man, and it's scary. I don't blame guys. Who was it? Nick or Nate Borland, the standout linebacker for the 49ers like 6 years ago as a rookie, had a phenomenal year, and his second year said, I'm done because he had a concussion and was scared for his health. I totally get it when guys make those decisions.
I'll say this about Tua. I appreciate his honesty. I appreciate his openness. I think that goes a long way. And I think it reminds us all he's human, that he's not just he's not just going to say what the Dolphins want him to say. Because I think he knows, it sounds like Tua is smart enough and has self-awareness enough to know, listen, when my run with Miami ends, my career is probably over. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to be the guy who just lasts in the league as a backup because of this issue and because of my size and things like this. So the best thing he's got going for him is to be honest, to kind of make Miami love him, rally around him. And it seems like they have, and give him a chance to, maybe earn an extension and ride out and be the starter and give him a chance to win. And he's got a great team around him to help him win now. I will say one of the things about that, the quarterback's getting whipped to the ground, that is directly a result too of protecting the quarterbacks. You're not allowed to sack them anymore and hit them. So what guys are doing is they're wrapping in the middle, twisting and throwing.
Yeah,
and
release
because
them. Yep.
I'm not putting weight on him. I'm just throwing him to the ground. And that's something that the NFL can't ever get rid of, because, I mean, it's like, otherwise you are literally flag football. And what's happening is, for these smaller, lighter athletes, Kenny Pickett's a slimmer guy. You know what I mean? Obviously Tua, they're when, Khalil Mack is turning you and throwing you, you're going flying. And you lose control of your body. So it is, again, it just goes to show the importance, if I was an NFL general manager, on size, on durability, to withstand the hits that you are allowed to still take, and these kind of whip throws. And it's something that if you are the Tuas, the Bryce Youngs, the Kyler Murrays, you're going to have to work with your trainers and your coaches to understand, like, what's the best course of action for me when I get wrapped up like this? How can I protect myself? And these new helmets are a thing that Tua is going to be a guinea pig for this year, and I think that's great. And so I'll end it with this. I love the openness from Tua, and I am excited to see Tua this year with this loaded Dolphins roster in a very tough AFC and a very tough AFC East. Because when he was healthy and playing well with the healthy Tyreek Hill, they looked like a not only a playoff team, but a playoff team that could make real noise. And he wasn't there at the end of that stretch run. So can he be there this year? It's going to be another really interesting storyline throughout the whole season.
Yep, and add Jalen Ramsey to the mix, and they've kind of shore up that defense. An interesting thing too is Tyreek Hill came out and said that he's basically playing out this contract, and then he's done with football. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah, I did.
So that's like age 31. I think he'd be.
I
at
love that
time
too.
Yep.
He said,
you have clarity now as a franchise of where you're headed.
I'm going to give you everything I got for this contract to try to make myself a Hall of Famer, to put up as big a numbers as possible, play in the year for 10 years like Calvin Johnson, and then walk away.
Yep. Makes perfect sense. Finally, before we close out the show, Mark, just some news on the Trey Lance situation.
I love this story.
From Ian Rappaport that the 49ers have received inquiries from several teams looking into a potential trade for former number 3 pick Trey Lance. The conversations have been the result of San Francisco fielding the calls, not making them, with teams aware that Brock Purdy is likely the future starter. That quoted from Ian Rappaport on Twitter there. So certainly, something that's not a huge surprise. We figured that Trey Lance might be on the trading block considering how Brock Purdy played. They went out and got Sam Darnold, clearly feel comfortable with the quarterback room as it stands right now. Unfortunate for San Fran if this is the case, that the experiment completely failed, but not entirely their fault as well, as he got injured, one start into his, career last season. And then Brock Purdy played very well in getting them, all the way to the NFC Championship game. So you totally understand that perspective. I'm curious to see what the compensation would even look like here and what teams are inquiring about this, because like we played with our guessing game about what teams were looking to trade up, and take one of those top spots. This seems like another thing is who's trading up to get Trey Lance. Is it the same teams? Is it the, Atlanta Falcons, or the Detroit Lions or something like that? Would be very interested to see, but whoever that team is, taking a big risk, Mark, big risk.
Well, did it say in the tweet how many teams were looking?
Not in this one for me and Rappaport. It just said several teams.
So my instant reaction to this is, if I'm San Francisco, I absolutely consider this, because you took a big swing for Trey Lance because you've had some of the most ridiculous quarterback issues of a winning team in NFL history. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And Brock Purdy clearly won your locker room, won your city, and showed you in Kyle Shanahan, your coaching staff, like, okay, this is what we want from our starting quarterback. This really is what we want. It's Jimmy G, only we think he could be maybe more healthy and a little bit younger and even more cost controlled. I mean, we're paying him literally pennies in the NFL world. So I would absolutely take the calls. If I was San Francisco, I think these calls will heat up post-draft when the quarterbacks fall the way they do. And I do think there is the chance that you could get a second rounder for him or something like that. And I think there are teams that would be willing post-draft to say, yeah, take next year's second rounder. You know what I mean? Like, because again, once you
you know what? It could even be teams that, see how the first round plays out.
Yeah.
Right. And they're like, we didn't get our quarterback that we thought maybe would fall to us. So now we're prepared to give them this year's second or next year's,
third,
or whatever.
This year's third and next year's second, something like that.
Yep.
I think that's about what you could get for him. You're not getting a first. I think you can get more than a fourth, but maybe it's a second and a fourth or something like that, or two thirds, something in that world.
Yep, maybe a player packaged in there. Who knows?
Yeah, I think there is a lot of teams that should be interested. And if you're San Francisco and he goes somewhere and he has a great career, I think San Francisco will be okay justifying letting him go. But I think absolutely makes sense. The number one team is Tennessee, because it's their new GM is a former San Francisco guy, came over this offseason who was very high in the getting of Trey Lance to San Francisco. But I also think that Atlanta, Tampa, the Jets, there are teams out there that all should be inquiring, that absolutely should be inquiring. Seattle in their own division should absolutely be inquiring. Now they have to maybe pay a little bit more. It might make more sense for them to just draft Richardson or Hooker or whoever, you know what I mean? But I think Trey Lance's NFL story is not done yet. I really don't think it's done yet. This is not a Deshaun Kaiser type thing. I think there's a real chance that this kid could still have a legit career in this league if he gets out of San Francisco and ends up in the right spot. But he may even still start for San Francisco this year, and that might not be the worst thing in the world for his career either, because we've seen San Francisco tends to play the hot hand.
It's all about circumstance. And yeah, I mean, San Francisco's willing to, go off of a guy and willing to ride the hot hand, as you said. So absolutely. I mean, all factors are in play right now. We'll see what they decide to do, what happens draft day. I kind of have a feeling if something does get done, it'll happen day 2, day 3 of the draft. And, or like you said, perhaps maybe even right after the draft as well.
Yeah, if you're Trey Lance, you welcome this at this point. I think you welcome the change of scenery. Fresh start. And it's not his fault that no one expected Brock Purdy to come in and be good. We all said, hey, well, Jimmy G's one thing, I get it, and then Jimmy G gets injured, and everyone, we all wrote off the Niners that day. Mm-hmm. And Brock Purdy had a Jeremy Lin sanity type of run. And, that happens in the NFL. Next man up mentality is a real thing. And I don't think he necessarily holds maybe the animosity, but I do think maybe a fresh start is good, could be great for Minnesota. I heard was rumored. Again, I would, if I'm Minnesota, absolutely kick the tires on that, knowing that this is your last real year with Kirk. And you get him in there with Justin Jefferson and those weapons for a year of learning behind him, and all of a sudden, whoa, we could really do something with Kevin O'Connell and that offensive staff. So there's a place for Trey Lance in this league, especially in this same. Think about the same places that might be considering drafting Richardson and Hooker. Same teams that should absolutely kick the tires on giving up a third rounder for Trey Lance.
No question. Gotta make that move if you are in that position. No doubt about it. All right. Well, the NFL draft is Thursday, April 27th, next Thursday. We're already here. It's crazy. Time flies. Obviously, that runs 3 days through Saturday, and the big episode that we've been waiting for coming up next week as well. Early next week, be on the lookout for our NFL mock draft, drafting the entire first round. See what our thoughts are. We're not going to do trades, right? We just do it straight through because it's impossible to predict trades.
Yeah, and our goal is always we're not trying to get it right. We're just saying if we were the GM of this team, what would we do in this position?
Yep, absolutely. It's something that we feel fills the team's needs and what we think they should do with that pick. So that'll be a lot of fun. Really,
we love hot takes, but we're also trying to tamper expectations that Mark and Dan think they're going to get every pick right.
Yeah. No, I'm expecting only about 75% accuracy.
Oh, damn! I'd be pumped about that.
Right, that would be amazing. I think a couple of years ago I got like one of the picks right, and it was like pick 22, so I felt great about it because I was like, yeah, no one knew what the late round pick was going to be. But
I saw the insight there.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, be on the lookout for that. As always, follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, all of that good stuff. Give us a like, subscribe. Really helps us out. We appreciate you listening. Thank you to Joe Person of The Athletic for his time today, and we'll see you all back here for the mock draft episode next week.